You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Well, welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Julie Swearingen.
Hi.
Did I get the last name proper?
You did, and I really appreciate that. It's been mispronounced, misspelled, used to make fun of me as a nickname.
How do you
Um,
make
but
how do you make fun of somebody with the last name like that?
so when I was in elementary school, when kids were first really starting to learn how to read, like unassisted, they thought that my last name was Schwarzenegger.
What?
Or at least that's what they were like, we're going to make fun of you and call you Julie Schwarzenegger, which I was like, if my dad was really the Terminator, like he would come and kick your ass. So like, go for it. But my dad actually was a sheriff's deputy for about 35 years. And during the time when I was in school, so he showed up one day to bring me my homework because I'd left it at home and he was in uniform, and they stopped making fun of me for the rest of that year. But it's just because people can't they don't know how to pronounce it, and because it's so unusual that generally they'll just kind of like say something else.
I mean,
And
I can relate to you. My name's Robbie Robertson. So growing up, that was never fun. Even the teachers had to stop and address that as well. I mean, mostly I get
right.
the occasional, like, are you related to the guitar player? Which is the reason why I don't have a Twitter, because that guy capitalized that name on Twitter forever. I mean, he posts like, I don't even know, like 100 times a day. I'm sitting there like, do you even write music anymore? He's just an older guy, but it seems like Twitter is his outlet. But like even the teachers would be like, Robert Robertson, and I'm like, why are you saying it like that? Just pronounce
Yeah.
it. And they're just like, it's a weird name. You got like the name twice. I'm like, name's so nice, you say it twice, buddy.
I went to middle school with a guy. I was pretty good friends with him. He had been adopted by his stepdad, which made his name Austin Austin.
Wow.
I just don't understand why you would change it. Even if he's adopted, you could have just left him with his other last name or somehow. But yeah, so he and the kids were merciless to him, and I just was like, it's just his name. Like, doesn't make him a bad person. Yeah,
I'm
anyway.
definitely going to be a little bit creative when I have kids. It's going to be something, either if I have four of them, they're going to be named after the Ninja Turtles. Because I mean, you don't mess
Nice.
with people that have badass names like that. Like if you got a kid named Beowulf, nobody's fucking with that kid.
I think that's probably true. When I still considered having kids when I was younger, I wanted to name them after Disney characters. So mine were going to be Ariel and
My
Belle.
middle
So
name is
that's
actually
where.
after a Disney character.
Oh, is it really?
I'm
Oh, that's awesome.
I it's actually from one of the movies you just said. Not Ariel is obviously not my middle name, but it's from that movie.
Oh, what is it?
Oh, you got to guess.
Eric.
No. It's from The
Uh,
Little Mermaid, but it's not Ariel.
so
Starts
like,
with an S, and if I say the rest of it, you're gonna get it.
wait, I'm so blanking, and this makes me so sad. I actually have flounder tattooed on my body, and I'm
It's
literally
not the fish.
for right, but I'm forgetting the names of like the other
You're
characters.
forgetting
Like
the
I'm trying
one
to think of what
person
the
that helped her or helped her out throughout the whole entire movie.
the little crab.
Yes.
What is his name? Scuttle.
No, it's
No.
not Scuttle. I wish my middle name was Scuttle. That'd be so much more badass.
What is his name? Like Sebastian?
Yeah.
Okay, man. Oh, so I would have not run Disney trivia anytime soon.
Yeah, you
Goodness.
just lost the run on that one. You
Oh,
lost out on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Try again next time.
I think I have friends who are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, "We judge you. We judge you so hard right
Even
now."
I knew that
So
one, and I barely watched
I
it.
I mean,
What's your worst
uh,
what's your worst Disney movie? Like what's one you really cannot stand to watch?
um, Oh gosh, so as a kid of the 80s, I mean, I know the music and the words by heart to pretty much any Disney movie that came out between 1979 and 1995, but I haven't watched one since. So I like got to high school and was like, I'm too cool for Disney. So like I've never seen Tangled, I've never seen Bray or whatever ones. I haven't seen most of them. I'm trying to think of one that I really didn't like. I had parts of Fantasia that scared the shit out of me as a
I don't
kid.
even think I've seen that one.
So Fantasia's like it's small vignettes of really old Disney stuff. Like Mickey is the sorcerer, and then he like calls demons from the sea, and there's like broomsticks that get chopped up by an axe, and then they turn into more broomsticks, and it just like scared the shit out of
I
me.
think the only one Disney movie, like I haven't seen any of the newer ones with the older ones. There's only one that I will not watch because every time I watch it now, it just I get sick. I got when I was a kid, I got carbon monoxide poisoning, and when I went to the hospital, this was back like when I was like 5 or 4, and they shoved tubes up my nose, and I kept going in and out of like kind of like consciousness a little bit, and they played Beauty and the Beast over and over again on a small ass TV with tubes stuck up my nose. And only every time I remember my little cousin was watching Beauty and the Beast, like I literally, it brought me back to that moment and me trying to eat not a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but a peanut butter sandwich with tubes up my nose watching Beauty and the Beast. Worst fucking experience ever. I associate it with that movie, and it's forever burned into my head. So whenever that pops on or whenever I'm eating a peanut butter sandwich, I immediately get taken back to that.
You know, I can see that. There's a couple of movies that I remember watching like when I was like puking. And so then like as a kid we would put them on again and I'm like, yeah, I only remember me watching this and I've been vomiting. So, yeah,
I only
I
remember
can see that.
this scene and then my head in the toilet and then another scene a little bit later down the road.
Yeah.
Well,
Oof, that is
well,
rough.
so Julie, now we could talk about Disney movies all day, but tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
So I am a professional editor. I edit people's books. So I do memoir and fiction. I've dipped my toe into a little bit of children's books. Um, they're not they're not what I want to specialize in, but I've liked the ones that I've edited so far. And then I also do marketing for authors and small publishers. So I help them with their social media presence, and I help them by sending out pitch letters so someone will review their book or, you know, tell their friends about it. So I play with books all day long, is pretty much the answer to what I do.
Now, are we talking about now? Is this kind of like a form of ghostwriting? Because I didn't know what that was originally, but somebody writing like a book for someone that really doesn't know how to or doesn't have the time to. Is that kind of a little bit of what you do, or do you more do like you get the finalized copy of the book that's written and you try and give a little bit of edited version, what's going to sound better and what's going to be better to go into the book to, I guess, bring more of a overall ease or audience attraction in a way?
Definitely the second. So ghostwriting is a whole other animal, and there are definitely editors who specialize it. I know one here in town where I live in Bend, Oregon, she calls herself a writing coach, and so she can take someone who just has like a really small idea, generally nonfiction. She does a lot of business books, but they'll be like, I kind of equate it to on The Office when Michael wants to write that book, Somehow I Manage, but she takes them and goes like all the way to like a very finished project that they can then like pitch to publishers or publish themselves. I'm less doing that and more getting their rough manuscript, but they've written the whole thing. So it's got a beginning, middle, and end. And I'm trying to make sure it's smooth all the way through so that, a character's name doesn't accidentally change because you had changed it one time and didn't catch them all. Or um there's not something that's super offensive in your book unless you're trying to be offensive. um And I have a business partner in Portland who does a lot of the same thing. And she works a lot on the copy editing side, which is really just like the final cleanup of a manuscript. And that's like grammar and punctuation and all that fun stuff. But I really like the meatier part where I get the book right after the author is like, I can't work on this anymore. I'm going to go insane. Someone needs to look at it. And I do. And then I tell them, hey, it's actually really good. We just need to change these parts. And then it goes through the process.
So I kind of want to make a jump here and a little bit of a claim. I'm guessing you got into writing, or not writing, but editing from writing. I'm guessing that you have a passion for writing your own stories or just kind of novels in general. But it seemed like you were a little bit better at also editing and seeing from a different perspective into someone else's work.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, even as a kid, I liked just writing like funny stories and I would write something down and then tell my mom. Um, and, I did good at like short fiction when I was in school. And then when I got into college, it was more people would come to me and say, I wrote this paper, but I think it needs some help. Will you look at it? You're a great writer. And I started instinctively being like, yeah, you need to fix this part or whatever. And then a cousin of mine, who's about 5 years older than me, is also an editor. She works at one of the big five publishers in Tennessee. And so when I saw her actually like making that into a job, I was like, oh, like that's exactly what I want to do. And I still write a little bit. I participated last month in part of National Novel Writing Month. It's called NaNoWriMo. But what I find is I the inspiration doesn't come to me as easily as maybe it does to other people. And I know that's where people are like, oh, you can get inspiration from anything. But when I read someone else's work, I get inspired and I go, I think I know what you're trying to say. If we change this, does it make your point better? And then they go, okay, it does. Or no, I think we still need to go back and forth. So yeah, I am a writer, but I really like editing more.
I can understand that. I think it's a little bit more of a perspective difference when you start to be an editor and you start looking at a book that someone else has published. Because much like taking a step back after you write a paper, giving it like a day or giving it a few hours or so, and then coming back to it, you come refreshed. You come from a whole different mindset where you can actually see, okay, a typo here. I'll take out this word, put that there. It's difficult, I guess, to be able to do that on your own. That's why a lot of people go to editors. And
Mhm.
my fascination just with writing in general, because I mean, when I write college papers, it's more like once the keyboard's in front of me, I can just get going. But then I have to, after I get a few paragraphs, I can cram a whole entire 4-page paper into just a few short hours. But when I stop and I decide to go back to it later and I start to realize that there's other words I could be adding in, it's a whole different insight. I mean, I remember for one of my intro into art history classes, my teacher gave me a method of observing paintings using a psychology background that he knew I was interested in. He told me to psychoanalyze art. So we were taking a field trip, and I decided I didn't want to go on this field trip with a bunch of people I didn't really know. Missed out on that experience mostly because I had work, but I kind of faked it. Okay. I hate to say it, but I told him I did go on one, and I went with one of my friends up to a different museum. So he was like, okay, write a paper about your experience there. And I was like, how do I write a paper on something I never went to? So I kind of bullshitted through it, but I went into deep detail explaining the backgrounds of the art and explaining the types of things that were there, the exhibits that I was seeing and watching. I went onto the website and was going off Instagram pictures. Like, I was going all out on this. And I got done with this paper and I handed it to my mom. I was like, can you read this real quick and make it sound like we actually went to a art museum? And at the end of it, she was like, kind of like, seemed like she was in tears. She's like, did you go to this without me? And I was like, no, I never went to it. She's like, you never went to this? And I said, yeah. And she goes, this is really fucking good. And she literally
Yeah.
goes, I knew you were a bullshitter. And I was like, look, it's the way I crafted out the words too, which I found that, like, from childhood kind of reading a dictionary, doing those types of things as punishment for, not actually paying attention in class. My parents would have me write down like words from the dictionary and expand my vocabulary. I was crafting that out in my writing, and I found that that was making a more believable essay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what's funny to me about that is that think about like actors are great bullshitters, right? Like that's their job, is to take something and like make it bigger and whatever. But I think really good authors, and somebody might be offended and be like, well, don't call it bullshitting. And I'm like, right, but it's creative writing, right? Like you take Stephen King and he's creating these worlds like under the dome, but that's never happened. So it is in essence bullshit, but it's very entertaining bullshit. Like
Well, you don't get
it's
10,000 leagues under the sea by telling a true story.
right. I mean, it's so interesting to think about that, because I think some authors do get hung up, and writers, I might be that person, is that I get really hung up on my writing if it doesn't sound believable. And I tend to not read things that don't seem at least somewhat believable. Like I like dystopian and I like futuristic stuff, but I don't do science fiction fantasy as much as a lot of other people, because I have a hard time following all the world building, because I'm like, wait, that person does this thing and then that, and I'm so confused. But if you can make it still realistic and then change a few things and be a good like bullshitter, that's the book I want to read.
So more of giving a kind of a structure or a more realistic thing with adding a little bit of creativity kind of flavored in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I go back to like the Hunger Games. I love those books. Like I read each of those books in like 5 or 7 days, just devoured them. And that's the kind of thing where I'm like, I don't understand how someone came up with all this. I think some writers are just genius. Like they've actually correlated creativity with mental illness over the years. But I think there has to be something in your brain where you're like, I can literally imagine this other world and I'm going to put it on paper.
Yeah, it's an escape into a different reality. It's hard to
Yeah.
really kind of show that or create imagery in somebody's mind from just a couple few words, but people have been able to capture that sense of creativity and free thinking that can literally create this imagery in someone's mind. I mean, one of my favorite poems of all time, I've said it before on the podcast, but Robert Hayden Frost, like Those Winter Sundays,
Mhm.
was one of the very first stories I really ever wrote, or not wrote, but read, where it literally like I could picture everything in my mind. And me having ADHD, that's not a simple thing to do. But
Yeah.
when it comes to writing, like, or even just editing, how hard is it for you to know that, since you've actually written and you know how difficult that is, and editing might be a little bit easier for you, but how hard is it for you to be critical of other writers, without really shooting down their dreams? Because when you when someone gives you their work to read, they are looking for criticism, but at the same time, you have to be careful how you give them criticism, because it could be very offended, because it's basically like they're asking you, like, this is my baby, so
Yeah.
how
It's
does it
like
look?
telling someone their baby's ugly. I mean, you can't do that, right? Like you might in the back of your head be like, I have issues with
Did you
this.
drop that baby? Holy crap.
But so I have a master's degree in this. There's a program in Portland, Oregon that you can go, and it's a 2-year program, and you're basically immersed in a fully functioning publishing press for 2 years. And so I met my best friend there, and we like have a little side business together with editing and stuff. But the the short answer is that we took classes basically, where a really good editor came to us and said, one of the things we're going to do is you're going to give your previous work that you've written, I don't care how long ago it was or for what class it was, and other people are going to critique it, and you're not allowed to say a word. And that was terrifying. It was so much pain and anxiety. And I happened to submit a paper that I had written, a short story from an undergrad class that was about the farm that my aunt had when I was a kid, that I practically lived at and just loved. And a gentleman in the class just ripped it apart in a very mean and unconstructively critical way. And so that, by torture, I learned don't do that. And so what we really do is a lot of times we will make notes for ourselves that might, if someone saw them, be like, wow, that's mean. But we need to get it out to be like, this is why this particular thing bothers me, or you can't say that, or hey, you're kind of being racist. And then after reading the whole manuscript, we come back to those, or at least I do, and I go, okay, now I understand why you said it, but now I need to explain to you why it's not working. And that's how you phrase it, is you do have to say to someone, I understand why you put this on paper and why you liked it. And now I'm telling you from a reader's perspective why I don't like it. It's not that I don't like you. It's that if I read this on the shelf in a bookstore, I wouldn't take your book home.
There's so many factors that come into what someone is attracted to and what someone's not attracted to when it comes
Yeah.
to reading a book, especially. I definitely think that you have to have a sense of empathy when you're going on to a type of editing role. You have to be able to kind of stay critical, but also know that you are basically ask like someone's giving you their work, and please don't judge it super, super harshly.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because you
Yeah.
don't want to deter anybody from writing it ever again. I'm pretty sure we've all met people in our life that have tried to say something about our work or something we were really, really like full on 100% into. And they've told you that, oh, this is terrible. You're never going to be a writer. This is terrible. You're never going to be an artist. This is, that type of criticism can actually make or break somebody. So you do want to attack it with a form of empathy, but also realize that they are coming to you for criticism, and you should be doing them a service by also letting them know what they do need to fix.
Right. And we've all talked about that. All of the editors that I'm friends with, and we have an editing guild in the Pacific Northwest. And so it does come up a lot. And one of the things too is like I want to be known as an honest editor. Like I don't want that side, like I'm not going to bullshit you. So I've had people approach me about their books, and my honest answer was, I don't think your book is ready. And if you want me to edit it, it's going to take this much time and cost this much. And I don't want to shoot down their dreams, but I also don't want to take on a project where I cannot help them and they're paying me and it's not going to work out. Because I'm not going to take your money if I cannot help you.
Now, do you have a checklist that you run through when you're editing somebody's books? Like, do you look for spelling corrections first? Do you look for any type of things that are like common mistakes that might actually interfere with the way the story is being read? I feel like sometimes if you include a lot of short words or long words, it actually can affect the overall paragraph that the word is placed in.
Right. So it can depend on the genre, but because I focus more on what's called developmental editing, and that's like the first round. That's, someone got their manuscript to the point of, like I said, they think they've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything is kind of wrapped up and they just need to know what's next. So in developmental editing, we really try not to focus on anything that has to do with grammar or punctuation, that can be cleaned up by a copy editor and a proofreader, because that will just it's just too much. It's time consuming. Um, if I notice someone is constantly confusing then and then I will just make a note of it, and that goes into their editorial letter that they get with their manuscript back. But with developmental editing, like what I'm looking for is, how does the story start? Are we like thrown into action and, all of a sudden we're like, oh, this is so exciting? Or is there a ton of explanation of why this character is doing this thing and why we're following this main character? And, am I bored? That's what I'm looking for. Like, so I like editing memoir, and memoir is really weird because obviously it's someone's real life story, but also there's not like, we can just jump right into the action. And so what I'm looking for is, have you set up why someone wants to write, or excuse me, read your memoir? Like, why do we care about what you've gone through in your life? And the one I worked on last year, and she published it earlier this year, was about her family dealing with several deaths due to opioid overdoses. And so that's really timely to what's going on in our country right now. And so we wanted to make sure that, like, it kind of like the first couple pages of the book like gut punch you, where she basically is like, there was a joke on Facebook about how everyone in Utah is addicted to Diet Coke, except I don't think the word addiction is funny because I lost 3 of my family members to opioids. And you're like, oh shit. And you're instantly want to read her book.
Oh, wait. So
So
you have to keep in mind all these factors when you're also editing somebody's stuff. You have to make sure that what audience might be actually affected by the
yeah.
types of words that are being said.
Oh, absolutely. And here's what's really funny. Like, even in our classes, our instructor for our 2 main editing courses at PSU, he really did talk about like the audience and the market that the book is going to be like, published into, and would give, he gives a lot of his authors like, here's some readings you should do on books that are similar to yours. But what a lot of editors get really uncomfortable with is they're like, well, I don't know, like, I'm not doing marketing for this person. And so what I have combined is I'm an editor with a marketing background, so that when I'm editing your book, I'm saying, this is who's going to read your book. Let's play into that readership a little bit more. Like, let's make sure that that is the person you're attracting. Not to say other people won't pick it up, but you always have to think of your audience. Like, if you're writing a children's book, you have to make sure the reading level is appropriate for, the audience you think would pick up this book. I just worked on a middle grade book where he's using some big words that even I had to go and Google, but the subject matter is still like late elementary, early middle school. And so we kind of have to work out, are those words too big, or will those words inspire the readers to go look them up, to make them want to learn something new?
And this all correlates to whatever type of literature work or novel that you're actually judging. Because
Yeah.
if you're dealing with like a Dr. Seuss type book for a kid or something, if they're using things like novelistic or literary elements, you're going to be like, this is written for 4-year-olds, right? And you're like, not
Right.
most 4-year-olds are educated in this way.
Well, yeah, and then you have to be careful because like I've worked on a couple of children's picture books, and the fine line is we don't want to dumb it down, because again, a lot of times parents are reading it to their kids and the kid could say, "Mom, what does that word mean?" And it opens it up to the parent going, "Hey, let's get the dictionary," or "Siri, what does this word mean?" And then there's like a dialogue that's happening. And so any book is really available for an educational purpose, right? Like, even a fiction book, even something like The Hunger Games, is educational for its readers to say, man, is this where our country is headed, right? Like, if you go back to, so I love the TV show The Handmaid's Tale, although it is so frightening. The original book of The Handmaid's Tale, which was published in like the 80s, is gorgeous. It is a wonderful book, but it is so scary to look at a book that's like, this is fiction, and then think about, what if this really happened to our life, right? Like, what am I doing in my life to make sure that this proposed dystopian thing doesn't come true? And that's what every book should be doing, though, is somehow asking a question that gets its reader to go, oh, I want to be a better person, or I've never thought about that, or I didn't know that. Like, that's the other reason I love memoir, is that because you just learn so much about other people.
So this is your preferred kind of novel that you would like to edit, is more of memoirs.
They've just come to me more recently because I read a lot of memoirs. Like, I really love, I put them on, I do Libro FM for audiobooks. Libro FM is way cooler than Audible because you can actually pick a bookstore and they get credit for your purchase. But I put on audiobooks every time I drive back up to Portland. And from where I live now, it's about 3 hours each way. And so I grab like a memoir about somebody that I've heard of, or maybe, not. And then I listen to their life story as I'm driving. And it's just kind of like, oh, wow, it's so different than my life, right? Like, we're also in our heads that it's like, well, we need to learn about other people. And what better way than to just listen to them tell you their story
Hey,
for 6 hours,
you're preaching to the choir. It's kind of what I really
right?
enjoy about the
Exactly.
podcast here. I love when people come on and start telling me, start spinning some yarns.
Yeah.
So
And I think a lot of people think, well, I don't have a story. And I've gone through that myself. And it's like, no one wants to hear about my life. But then it keeps coming up, right? Like, so I'm editing a memoir. So I edited her memoir about opioid addiction. I was a pharmacy technician for 5 years, just randomly in between school things. And so we connected because she was like, oh, so you know about what happens when people are trying to get their hands on Oxy and they're not supposed to. And I'm like, yep, I do. And then another person approached me and she was like, I want to write this story. It's about me and my sister. She was convicted of a murder, but it seems like she was convicted harsher than a man in the same area. And I said, oh, that's interesting. My dad was a police officer for 35 years. So something about my story, whether I ever tell it or not, is still relevant to people I'm meeting. And that's what I think everyone wants to do, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. They just want to tell a story.
I think that's what kind of makes it more relatable and more attractive to an audience as well. As a lot of people want to sense a thing of realism and also an insight into other people's life and kind of make similar kind of, I guess, jumps into connection with their own. I think that's what makes a lot of I guess true readings, more like stuff that's based on historical things or types of
Mhm.
situations that are relatable to an audience. I believe that that's more, I guess, driven towards the public because people want to read something and be like, wow, I could be in this person's shoes, or oh, I know what that's like, because it makes it more relatable and makes the reader feel like he could actually be in this situation.
Well, and I think we're missing that from our like current society. Because if you think about even, my grandpa growing up in the 40s and my mom and dad in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of storytelling from older generations, right? Like your grandparents would tell you their stories, or because I think we're fourth generation from Norway and Sweden. So my grandma would tell me funny stories about her Norwegian cousins coming over from Norway and teaching her swear words, which I thought was, so amusing as a kid. But they're gone now, and I don't know those words and I don't hear those stories. And we have social media where everyone's like, we're connected. And I'm like, no, we're not. I read about you online, but I have no idea what's going on in your daily life. I miss sitting down and just talking to people and saying like, oh, that was this funny thing that happened. So we're getting it more from books and we're getting it from movies and from TV shows that are based on real people. And so then we can still experience it, but it is really different to do it. Like book clubs have become a big thing again. I work part-time at a bookstore here in town, and I see that people come to these book clubs because they want to talk about this book with other people, not just online, not just, they read it and they don't have anybody to talk to about it. So there's like books are bringing, I hope, bringing people back together.
So like, okay, so more like bring like a kind of connection or a bridge between two audiences.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like I see it and I'm guilty of it because I have so many friends on social media. And so then you'll run into them and you're like, oh, I remember that post you did, but I haven't talked to you in 2 years. And so I think a lot of times when we read books where we go, I recognize that person or I recognize that situation and I feel similar, we're trying for that connection again. Like we're so connected via social media, but we're so disconnected because we're not actually talking to someone in
I've
person.
talked about that so many
Yep.
times. All right, so my idea behind it, without rehashing old kind of sayings, I believe that the technology, the way that we've expanded and chosen to kind of fall into with our communication, is what I call false connectivity or false conversation.
Mhm.
It's much like if you ever play the game Sims. I have a feeling you have played that game. Uh,
Oh, I know of it.
yeah,
Yeah, for
it's a good
sure.
game. When it comes to the skills, okay, we have things such as eating, sleeping, showering, all these things that degrade really, really fast. But when we look at the social skill, it declines slower than all the rest. Now, when you start this game, if you're anybody like me, you want to build up a house by yourself, invite people over for parties and stuff, but really you want your character to be overall alone, because what's so much fun of thinking when you're a kid and you want to kind of go live on your own? You want to be by yourself or with a couple of friends. So when I built this character, I started noticing that the social skill was degrading really fast because all I was doing all the things I wanted to do, such as build a fish tank in my house and all these crazy things I couldn't do at the time. My sim started getting really, really depressed. And as an adult, I realized that that's what's going on in the world today. We're becoming very, very disconnected from actual people, and we're relying all of our connection into social media. Such as when you experience a bad day, you walk into the door, you don't want to talk to anyone in your house anymore. You honestly just want to go upstairs and put a Facebook post up or put something up on the internet that lets everyone out there in the world know that you're hurting. Yeah, you'll get a like, a little pat on the back, it feels like. Well, then
Yeah.
the next time you post, it's 2 likes, 3 likes, 4 likes, 5 likes. Now let's say it's a week later, and this is probably the 7th day you're going to post now. You get less likes than the last post you put up. So you didn't feel that pat on the back. You didn't feel like anybody was really hearing you at all. So you take it away. All that feeling and all that false connectivity and all that false communication, like someone cares about you over Facebook or over social media, can all be fixed if you just sat down with someone that you loved for 30 minutes and told them all the problems that was happening in your life and became more connected, things that we used to do at the dinner table that don't happen anymore. When you
Hmm.
did that, the overall power of someone that actually cares about you, listening to you, lasted way longer than just some person on social media that you barely ever talk to.
Yeah, I finally broke down and started going to a counselor about 6 months ago, and I just love it. And I adore her. And some sessions, all we do is kind of laugh, or I tell her a funny thing that my nephew did, and then I walk out. And I'm still grateful to be like basically paying someone to just let me vent, just let me say I'm frustrated. And the other thing is that is it's a freelance economy again, right? Like they say the gig economy is going to double in the next 10 years, and that's great for a lot of us, but that means I sit at home by myself most days. Like I have animals around me, but I'm alone for almost all of my work, which can get very depressing. And so then, who am I going to talk to? I can't tell my clients that I'm frustrated, or I can't tell, because then I get a lot of people who are like, well, then why don't you just go get an office job? Well, it's not that easy. Like, yeah, it's,
I mean,
I,
I
yeah.
get where you're coming from. See, the problem is that, like, you want to talk about counseling. Like, I know you listened to the episode with Lauren, but I actually talked to their mom as well because she's like an older sister to me. So their
Mhm.
mom is literally like my mom. Like, it's pretty yeah, it was pretty weird to find out later when I'm like in my 20s that she's a counselor. I had never have known that. My whole entire life, she's been this silent woman in my life that's kind of been like listening and calling me Roberto all the time. And on the podcast, we were talking about like the types of forms of therapy. That's where I wanted to be a counselor. Was I wanted to find a way to connect to people again. I wanted to do social work because I realized there was a bunch of people that were getting bullied, a bunch of kids that I went through things I went through when I was a kid, where I needed guidance and no one was there for me. I wanted to make sure I
Mhm.
could bring that sense of connectivity and sense of realism back into people's lives. Eventually, later, dealing with so much of the opioid addiction that was happening in my area, I wanted to go into chemical dependency and try and help out in a different way. I've helped kids when it comes to I'm working at my hotel and a dad has came up to me and said, "Hey man, like how's it going?" Starts talking to me like, "Hey, yeah, my kid's into video games. Do you know how like anything I can get him off of it?" And then he explained to me this story of his kid that loves playing video games and is a little bit overweight. Basically the same position I was in when I was a kid before I found the gym. I told him like, "Hey man, like I found the gym 7 years ago and I've been going every day since. It's not a brag on my part, but I found something that I love to do and it helps me relieve stress. Your kid's going to find what he needs to do." And he goes, "Well, can you just talk to him because he's really depressed?" I went in on my day off, saw them when they were leaving, and I asked the kid, like, started to sit down and talk to him one on one. The kid has a whole future ahead of him, but he couldn't see past that because of the way that everyone around him was putting him down. I
Right.
told him, even his dad was putting him down. It was a little bit upsetting, but I talked to him, kind of got him focused, and I realized if he did that over Xbox, if he did that over a type of communication, trying to talk about his problems and the emotional stuff he was going through, yeah, he'd feel good for the time that he was expressing it, but later it would affect him again. But I felt like after that talk with him, it really, really hit him to his core where he was like, thank you. Like, I'm honestly not going to put myself down for a while. And I really appreciate that, because honestly, I was going to be upset when I got home. And I just looked at him and he wanted to hug me. I was like, look, man, I don't know you that well. Get out of here. Like, trying to kind of blow it off and not tear up in a way. But I definitely think there's a real thing to actual connectivity. I mean, the fact, like, if you want to talk about in a writing standpoint, coming it from a more realistic and experienced angle when trying to relate to something, like if you're talking about opioid addiction, or if you're talking about something like that, if you come from a standpoint of someone who actually has lost somebody, you're going to have more impact with your words
Mhm.
and more of an overall effective tone on affecting the audience that is reading your story.
Yeah, I always want my authors to feel like they are an authority on what they're writing about, whether like whatever it's about, because that empowers them to talk about their experience. Because there's so many people who go, well, I went through something bad, but so have other people, and I shouldn't compare mine because theirs was worse. And I'm like, that's not what I'm never going to tell somebody, you can't say, you went through bad things, but other people, even my counselor has said that. She's like, don't say that. Everyone's experience is valid and makes them who they are. And if you want to share it to help someone else, do it. And so my authors sometimes are like, well, I don't know that anyone will listen to me. And I'm like, okay, but will it make you feel better to say it? Then just do it.
Do you think that when it comes to, I guess, invoking your words in such a way, when you're reading somebody's work or when you're trying to kind of write your own, do you find that the more words are the better, or less words?
Um, I'm a pretty concise writer. I tend to be a little bit more loquacious when I'm talking because I get hyper. Um, for me, when I'm reading something, I do tend to like somebody to get to a point pretty quickly, but I think it's all relative to the topic, because when you're talking about, let's say, losing someone to an overdose, you can't just say, and then they died from an overdose. Like, go into it. Like, talk about how you found them, what it did to your family. You were angry with them and how that felt. Like, I'm more get everything out on the paper, and then we'll look at the things that maybe need to be cut out a little. But I'm all for authors basically doing what I call word vomit. Get it on the paper. There's a saying, I feel like, I can't remember if it's Stephen King or Anne Lamott or one of those really famous authors and like writing coaches, that pretty much just say everyone's first draft is shit, but you have to get the shit on the paper.
I have to agree with that for sure. I definitely think
Yeah.
that I mean, if you look at even podcasting, for example, if you look at the very first episode you create to the episode where you're at now, there's a major growth hopefully, you know.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Our first podcast episode, like I was saying earlier, the sound is pretty bad, and I think it was like an hour and a half long. And sometimes we still have those, my friend and I that do our podcast, but a lot of times we can get to the point now better because we know what our listeners are looking for, and we know what we want to say now because we've just gotten better.
So I do want to take this little bit of a segue, so bear with me here. Now, when it comes to editing, do you also edit TV shows in a way, not like as in work wise, but just as a critic kind of standpoint? Like, you know a lot about editing, all the types of things that can go into a good novel. What about types of things that go into a good script? Like, you do a podcast with your friend called How I Met Your Friends Pod. So I want to ask, like, when you're watching, obviously it sounds like a mix of How I Met Your Mother and the show Friends, two shows I'm very, very, interested in. So when it comes to watching it and criticizing some things, do you start to use some of your editing skills in a way?
I think sometimes I do, and I think it has more to do with watching shows that I've seen multiple times and that maybe have not aged as well as one would hope. But what really got to me was an example one of our professors at school used, where he can no longer watch shows like CSI or basically crime procedurals, because what he hears is all of the exposition that they have to do to explain to the audience, like, oh, we're running the blood through the GCMS and it does this, when, in a normal setting of a crime lab, people wouldn't be explaining that to each other, right? Because they know the answer to all those questions. And so there gets to be a lot of over explaining things in TV shows because you have to bring your audience into it. Um, that sometimes can get so repetitive that you're like, please stop talk, like, don't, like, get on to the next scene. And I do think that he ruined CSI for me. Like, I still watch it on DVD or on whatever streaming channel it's on, and every now and then I will be like, this is terrible, this is terrible writing, and I'm so mad at that professor for doing this to my life.
Do you
And so we joke that it comes up a little bit in books now, though, too. Like, I had a couple of months after taking those classes where I couldn't read for pleasure, because as soon as I picked up a book, I was like, oh God, this is boring, and get to the point, and I don't need to know that about this character. And I'm back to being like, I like reading. I can sometimes see where someone should have cut something out, but that was their editor's choice, and I have no control over it. So I'm just going to read it because I like it. And so I still love TV shows, and I still watch the heck out of like true crime and crime procedurals, and obviously Friends and How I Met Your Mother are my main
So
obsessions.
where did these two obsessions come from? Are they just two of your like most favorite shows is just like watching from a kid and growing up? Like one of the most I know a lot of people usually say like Seinfeld. I can't stand Seinfeld, but when it comes to How I Met Your Mother, like I'm a big fan of that show, but I'm also a fan of Friends too. I mean, the fact that Pivot, like that one of the funniest things ever.
When I moved in March from Portland back down to Bend, we said pivot quite a few times. So um, I was 13 when Friends first premiered, and my mom happens to work for a television station in our town that is an NBC um, station. Hold on. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Something was wrong on my screen. Sorry. So she works for an NBC television station. And so we watched a lot of NBC just because, and then she would get like swag. Like, she would get posters, and
She
she
would
has a
get
signed,
swag.
she
Wow,
got
I
swag.
haven't heard it
She got
used like
corporate,
that before.
right? She actually has a signed picture signed to her from Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh God,
Somebody
please don't
at
talk about
one of
Jerry Seinfeld.
I know. We won't go on. But my mom was like, I love him, and she loved Jay Leno. And so we just watched a lot of NBC. And so I started watching Friends, and I was like, oh my God, is this what life is going to be like when I get into my 20s? Like, this is so amazing. And their apartment is so huge, and this could be so great. And then I got older and realized it was a big fat lie. But Friends for me was very like, I learned things about like some sexual innuendos from the show Friends that I, at 13, 14 was like, Mom, what does that mean? And just kept watching it. And then when it went off the air, I was working at a Barnes and Noble here in town, and for the series finale, I had told a couple of friends, I was like, hey, if you want to come over and watch it, we're going to have like snacks, and we're just going to watch it live. And my boss was like, I think I scheduled you that night. And I was like, oh, you should fix that or I quit. And he was like, you're not serious, right? And I'm like, oh, I really am. And he's like, I'll switch it. And then I never watched How I Met Your Mother when it was on the air. I had a boyfriend who tried to get me to watch it, but we were like into a different season, and I was like, I don't understand why this is funny. I think Barney's a dick, like Ted is stupid. And then finally when it went to Netflix, somebody was like, why don't you give it another chance? Like, it's very similar to Friends. And so I started watching it, and I was like, oh shit, I love this show. Like,
What?
I love
So,
it so
so
much.
which one do you prefer though, if you had to choose between How I Met Your Mother and Friends? Because I do like a lot of Friends, even though I saw it a little bit. Like I saw a couple episodes when I was a kid, but then I kind of binge watched it all on Netflix. But How I Met Your Mother, when I was coming home from school, was the one that was on the television.
Yeah.
So I would watch a lot with that. I'm a big fan of Neil Patrick Harris, just from the immense
Yes.
amount of movies that he's been in. But I felt like it played a little bit better towards my age group. basically crafting out through my high school years, like, this is a way you get to handle women. This is a way you get to handle life situations. When Friends kind of was there like that when my parents were growing up.
Yeah, and I think that that is so that's exactly what our podcast kind of goes over. So the real answer to your question is Friends will always and forever be my one true love, because the fashion, especially the first couple seasons when they're still in the 90s, anytime someone wears a short skirt or plaid or some sort of velvet, I lose my mind, because that was my, like, that was high school for me. Like, I'm watching Friends and going, Mom, can we go to the mall? Because I need this skirt. And she's like, what are you talking about? Rachel wore it and now I have to find it. And so, like, that was so defining in my life as a 90s teenager that I just can't, like, I can't get over it. The difference we found is most of my friends, so when we first started the podcast, my friend Allison, who is my business partner in our editing service, she loves How I Met Your Mother, but she's 11 years younger than me. So we could actually see that it was a generational difference. She thinks Friends is funny, but not that funny, and she thinks How I Met Your Mother is hilarious. And so everyone that I've come in contact with, when I've asked them that same thing, it really can depend on their age, because if they're late 30s like me, they're going to go, oh, it's Friends all the way. How I Met Your Mother's great, but it's always going to be Friends. And then my friends who are in their 20s are like, nope, I really love How I Met Your Mother, and I watch Friends occasionally. And so I can see, and that's why we decided to do the comparison, is that they both answer a need for separate generations to go, how do I grow up?
I think
What do I do when I'm an adult? Do I still have to love my parents, or not love my parents, but when my parents aren't the center of my world, who is?
I
And they both answer that
I
question.
also think it's a good actor aspect too. It seems like they get a bunch of like overall performers into their thing. Like with Friends, I know they weren't big at the time, but you got Jennifer Aniston. I mean, you
Oh
got
yeah.
David Schwimmer, you got all these people, Joey Tribbiani, whoever you want to call him as, Matt LeBlanc. But it was a bunch of different characters working in literally unicity towards each other. Like it seemed like they were
Oh,
in sync the whole 100% of the time. And it's funny, I'll look back at the show now and I was watching it on television. I was like, hold on, they've replaced Monica in this scene, and you're looking at it's a whole stunt double just from a different angle, different nose and
right.
everything. I'm like, wow, like I never noticed that before. But it's these things that, like that show, like with the don't touch the meatball sub or whatever. Oh my god, like
Yeah.
those were priceless moments too. I mean, they had the classic scenarios and classic kind of character personalities that make up a great TV show, such as there's obviously the idiot, the knucklehead, then there's obviously one that's kind of smart, serious, but more like kind of like an emotional guy. And then there's obviously like
Hmm.
kind of like a sports guy or some dude that's more of a comedian in the group. And it showed like their overall episodes and overall intake of the show was just perfect. And then you go, let's say a few years later, and you start dealing with How I Met Your Mother, coming at it from a different aspect. You got a bunch of different, really good actors, some that are popular, known at the time, but a lot of them like they really like
Yeah.
most of them are known for How I Met Your Mother. Neil Patrick Harris from other things, but when you
Hmm.
look at Ted from How I Met Your Mother, you notice him from How I Met Your Mother, not from anything else.
Yeah.
I definitely think that was an overall good character aspect of it too, and the types of corporations and storyline that they wrote into it was also really, really good. But those are literally two shows that will probably stand in infamy, much like Seinfeld does, on the aspect of it has captured an overall generation at their time of being produced.
Yeah, and they all gave us such good. So one of my favorite things is catchphrases. I mean, I just do. I love them from
Challenge
movies,
accepted.
right? I am that person who will pick up on something and suddenly it's in my vocabulary and people are like, you're weird, and I'm like, yeah, but it makes me happy. So when I was in high school and my friends and I were like, oh, we love this boy and he doesn't love us back, and my best friend Amanda was like, she got me, one of us got the other one little lobster earrings for Christmas, and we were like, you're my lobster, because like we're watching it and we're going, man, like we can, dating it, we weren't dating, but still, like, love is hard. And then you're like, but he's my lobster. They weren't, and that's fine. um the other thing is, I think one of the things that we notice too is that the differences in the shows, right? Like, so we can say, oh, Friends is about six friends in their 20s, figuring out life in New York City. How I Met Your Mother is about 5 friends in their, mid to late 20s figuring out their life. But they each tackle things so much differently. And in that aspect, that's why I actually think both of them work so well too, because How I Met Your Mother actually does a way better job of tackling really tough and sad things that will happen to you during those times. Like Marshall losing his dad is something that I could never
That
fathom.
was one of the
But the
scenes
way,
that had me
whew,
yeah, that ending where he's listening to a voicemail. I
oh,
don't get
whew,
very emotional unless it's the Titanic or Old Yeller. But at that
yeah,
ending when he's listening to his dad's butt dial, and then at the ending, oh, guess you were in my pocket, buddy. Well, just call to say I love you, and it was great seeing you and all. I hope to see you again soon. And then he's like, the last words my dad said to me was, "I love you." And then it literally goes, "Hey, yeah,
yeah.
by the way, have you seen my ointment?" And it's like, oh, it was so priceless. It really brought you back from that kind of on the point of literally breaking down.
Yeah, it's just, and so we're about to get into season 3 where Rachel and Ross break up, and obviously those are really rough episodes and everybody's been through that, and you can just like your gut just hurts when you think about it. But I feel like How I Met Your Mother, so we've read a lot of things from the creators of both shows, and the creators of How I Met Your Mother actually follow us on Twitter, and like we've heard from them before. They're really awesome guys. But what Friends really wanted to do was to still keep things light. Like they purposely, um, were kind of like funnier than they needed to be. Whereas How I Met Your Mother was really like, no, like this is the shit that really happens to you in your 20s. You quit a job and you can't find another one, or you get laid off, or you rack up thousands of dollars in debt, Lily Aldrin, and how do you fix it? Like I love How I Met Your Mother because it's a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, it literally is like the show for me when I was growing up in middle school. Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. It was this dude that would come on there and talk about ways to survive middle school. And it was like, like, oh, be careful who you like do this with, because it can end up getting you tossed in a trash can. And even though none of that related to real life, it was just a funny thing that I was able to relate to at the time. Like, oh, I'm in middle school too. But like with a show like How I Met Your Mother gives you more of a guideline and structure dealing with real world problems as well. I think a lot of people today still like go around and be like, fist bump or do all these types of things that How I Met Your Mother, where Barney was more of a bro and gave these
Right.
guidelines and kind of structures. I mean, the book or whatever, with all the playlist and everything that was inside of it, of all these different plays to pick up chicks. I'm pretty sure a lot of guys out there have tried some of those plays.
I'm sure they did. Um, I also think that like the flaws that the characters had. So like in Friends, Monica and Chandler deal with fertility issues, and it's more, oh, this is so sad, and Monica really wants to be a mother, and how are they going to work this out? But in How I Met Your Mother, you have Robin who, like me, has actually said, I don't want to have children. I am choosing. And she does find out later that she might have some reproductive issues. But for anything, that probably just answered her question of like, oh, cool. So I can't get pregnant. Like, that's fine with me. But it was, of course, because it's really hard for women to say, I don't want to have kids. Most people respond to me with, oh, you'll change your mind. I'm approaching 40. If one more person says to me, you'll change your mind, I might punch them.
Well, it
But
was a perspective change in the show too. When she was told she
yeah,
couldn't have kids, that's when she wanted kids. Um,
it's true. She did start, I think she started, that is the thing. You always want the thing you can't have. And you know what I mean? Like, or the thing you're told you're not supposed to do. But I think she still absolutely accepted it and then was a good aunt slash stepmom when things, finally worked out. But I also really liked that, like Barney is a complete misogynistic asshole, but he's very lovable. And Ted is a horrible romantic. Like I say horrible because he's actually not that nice to a lot of the people he dates because he's all about himself.
well,
But
also he
like,
falls for a common mistake that a lot of guys also do too, considering getting overly loving
mm,
at first, not understanding.
yeah,
They rush into something, not really giving it time to see how it feels. Marshall seems like probably the best guy in that group.
I think he's my favorite. Not only do I love Jason Segel because I think he's just so cute, but like I love Marshall. He actually reminds me of an ex of mine who would sing just random shit all the time, just sing, or we'd be in a store and he would start singing Michael McDonald songs. Do you remember the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin?
Yeah.
So in the background on those TVs, that white dude that's always singing soul music, I had an ex who would just burst into those songs for no reason. And I'm like, dude, you're Marshall. Like, you're totally Marshall.
I love it with
But
when he goes, his brothers play a prank on him through the drive-through, and he has to go through naked, and it's that CD that's stuck in the
oh,
car. I would walk
yes,
500.
I
I
know.
play that on
Like,
road trips because of that show.
right? And I mean, that's just it. Like, I think each show is relatable for very different reasons. Like, we can say Friends isn't realistic because they live in this nice apartment and they obviously can't afford it, but they talk about that a lot too. Monica's like, I'm broke. I know I'm broke. Like, what do you want me to do? So I don't know. They're just still my two favorite
It definitely
shows
seems like
ever.
the problems have shifted based on the time period that the show came out in as well. Seems like
Oh
the
yeah.
jokes kind of obviously evolved a little bit. But more like when we're talking about Friends dealing with not, trying to have a kid and those types of things between Ross and Rachel. And then you're looking at things like Robin not having a kid, but also they're developing into a more of a different lifestyle. You can literally see the
Mhm.
perspective of New York change. Mean,
Yeah.
from Friends where they're going and sitting at a coffee shop to then it evolving into them sitting at a bar, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I really appreciate some of the episodes of How I Met Your Mother that are actually a little nod to Friends. There's one in the early part of season 2 where they go to a coffee shop and they're like, "Yeah, I don't get it. This isn't fun." And you're like, "Okay, we get it. You're making fun of Friends. That's fine." And then there's a flashback in season 3 of Friends where the coffee shop was originally a bar. Well, what are we going to do now? Where are we going to hang out? And so for me, it's that fun thing of like, nothing changes, right? Like, everything that people go through in some way or another is still the same for every person. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
to each is their
you
own.
yeah, and your location can be different and your family history and whatever, but we're all going to go through at some point, like, um heartache over a loved one or a significant other. We're all going to experience a firing from a job or disillusionment with a job that we have. We're all going to question whether or not we're good enough. Like, imposter syndrome is a real thing. It's been around forever. It just now got a name. And so that's where I'm like, you can find that in any show, obviously, but that's still why these two are my favorite.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty awesome that you have a friend and are able to do this podcast with too, because I definitely think like listening to you guys in your episodes, it's a kind of you can tell the age gap, but it's cool to see your guys' perspective on things as well. Obviously, someone siding over a different show rather than another one, but the overall breakdown, you're getting two different voices of, I guess, two different angles of with the time period gap. But it's really wonderful insight, especially, and I really appreciate that you have this podcast out there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was more I would send my friends, like, "Oh, this actor that was just on this one episode of How I Met Your Mother was originally on Friends." And my friend Allison finally responded with like, "Why don't you just make a podcast and leave me alone?" And I was like, "Okay." Like, I didn't think that anyone would. Well, it's the same thing, right? Like, we all want to tell our story. Like, who out there is going to care that I love these two shows, except for we're closing in on like 10,000 downloads. So, like, somebody
Exactly.
cares that I'm obsessed with these two shows.
Like I'm telling you, it's definitely your guys' kind of camaraderie in a way too. It's fun to see it because I believe it also brings in like you're bringing them into your group as well. And I
Yeah,
think
and
that's what's needed too. Like you want to talk about relatable experiences through writing and bringing in the audience. You bring in the audience when you're able to kind of create a camaraderie where people feel like they're sitting in the room laughing with you.
yeah, and I mean, that's really what we're hoping is um that we are finding those people. And we've had we have people reach out to us every now and then through emails or direct messages on social media, and they're just like, "I thought that exact same thing," or, "Oh wait, you said this, but I always thought it was this." And I'm like, "Yes, thank you, I will mention that on the next episode." Because there are, I mean, with Friends and the 25th anniversary this year and that little pop-up shop that happened in New York, like people still love it. And so we're just hoping like that it's still relevant to enough people that they still want to talk about it. I'm in a bunch of Friends and How I Met Your Mother groups on Facebook, and I mean, people post every day with just funny questions that they're still finding out about the shows.
Well, hey, Julie, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on my podcast. It's been amazing talking to you. I definitely think that we started off going a different direction than you probably thought we were going to go. But I really,
Oh no, I love this. I mean, I love talking about editing, and if it helps anyone who's out there writing a book to understand what an editor does, then I think I've done my job.
yeah, definitely. I mean, you provided me with as much as I was hoping for. I really appreciate you even taking the time to even do the podcast. I know I randomly slid in the DMs and was like, "Hey, you want to be on this pod?" You're like, "What are you about, bro?" I'm like, "I don't know." But
I mean, that's the best answer. You're like, whatever, we can talk about whatever. So I appreciate so much you asking us, and we'll keep listening to yours, and just excited to see who else you have to talk to.
thank you so much. I want to give you here a minute at the end to kind of promote your content too, so people can find you at any of the links that you have, so they can listen to your awesome content.
Perfect. So yeah, our podcast name is How I Met Your Friends. We're on all of the podcast apps. On Twitter, we are at HIMY Friends Pod. On Facebook and Instagram, it's fully spelled out How I Met Your Friends Pod. And we also have a Patreon, so that we're trying to just get a little bit of funding going so that we can buy some fun like merch and other things. So it's patreon.com/How I Met Your Friends Pod. And that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.